Chips. Hey everyone, it's Bagda from Ship Studios. We're back today with another tutorial for our Halloween series, and yes, today we are starting to paint our whole map. So we got a lot of things to cover since we created many assets, so let's get on with it. Alright, so back where we left off. So that's the map that we finished on to the last tutorial, and today, as I said, we want to get working onto the shading. So let's go to material preview. And then I want to go to the shading tab, but first let me just uncheck those and we'll be working on them. So we need to make them all visible. We'll be starting the work with the trees. Let me just go to the shading tab and let's go to front view. And I want to toggle here the selection and the viewport view. So let's go to the first tree. And right now we don't have any material, but first let me just get here, and I want to set render to 128 and viewport to 32. And I want to activate ambient occlusion, bloom, and also screen space reflections. Also, I want to take the shadows to 1K and I want to check the high bit depth. You'll see why I'm doing that. Okay, let's create our first material and I'll call this one tree top. Okay, so right now we have a principal, BSDF, and the material output, and we want to add some more stuff here. Okay, let's go to converter, color ramp, and right now it gives an error. So we need to do a converter shader to RGB for that to work. Okay, and you can play around with the slider here and you'll see some changes already. So this would be about the shading, the color, and shadows. So let's set this to constant first. And right now it will just change from one color to the other. So as you can see, we can change it from here, but that won't be the effect that we're going through right now. So let me just duplicate this color ramp and it flew on me. So let me just do that again. Okay, and I want to drag it here and press Ctrl T. And you can do that if you have the Node Wrangler add-on added. So make sure you have it from Edit Preferences and Add-on. So let's drag this vector here and generate it instead of UV. All right, and I want to add a color and mix RGB. We'll be using a lot of those. So I know it may look complicated, but bear with me. You'll see what I'm doing. So let's go for a hue saturation, and we want to drag this one here and this one to the the second output, and this one to the first, and let's place it here. And I want to duplicate this one here and then combine those color ramps with the mix RGB. So this one goes to the first and this one will go to the back, and the color goes to surface, and also the color ramp goes here into the second color output. All right, so now we created the effect that I was going for. So let me just change this from black to a color. So this would be our first green, and let's go for a darker tone since this would be the darker green that we'll be using, and we also have to set the light one. So I just copied dark green and then we go for something lighter and maybe a bit yellowish. So let's go to around here. Since we have quite a dark map, I don't want to go to really saturated color, so let's take the value down. And as you can see already, we made a nice shadow in there. And since we're going for the cartoonish style, I chose to go with constant shadows and they're looking really, really sharp. You can change the FAC if you want, but I'll just leave it at 0.5. So let me just take the color ramp here to the FAC. And as you can see, now it automatically does what it should do. Okay. So right now I want to duplicate the color ramp again. And I want to search for Fresnel effect, and I want to take it here and plug it here into the factor, and then put it into the factor of the last mix RGB. So it gives a really nice light effect. As you can see, we can change it around, and we'll do that for sure later, but right now we'll just keep it to our basic needs, since we'll be changing the lighting also. And don't forget, we're gonna go for a dark scene. Alright, we can also change the specular here if you want. I'll take it up to 1, or maybe I'll leave it at 0.5, and the roughness also. That will really affect our shadows, so take that into account. We don't want really shiny trees, so let's go for a higher value. Okay, now what I want to do is to drag them around a bit to make them more ordinated. Okay, that looks pretty good. So let me just take the value down even more so I can see how that changes the shadows. So you can make them softer or you can make them harder. Let's go to wireframe, and what I want to do right now is I want to separate the tree top from the tree trunk. So I want to add here a loop cut. So it should be on the inside and drag it to here. And then we select all the vertices here, and those will have the tree top assigned to them. And then we need to create another material, and let's call this one, let's see, tree trunk. I just duplicated the first one since we will be changing just the colors. So let's press assign after inverting the selection. And we want to change the colors, as I said, to some dark brown. And then we can copy the color and drag it here and take a lighter color from this brown. And let's see how that looks first. So let's go to material preview. Okay, maybe drag it around here and let's take a look. All right, that looks pretty good already. So let's drag this color ramp a bit higher into white. Okay, and you can see here the constant changes that it gets with the color. So we could actually set this one to ease. So we have a nice transition into the colors, and right now it's way too much light going on. So if you want, you can set for the colors ease, but I chose to use constant for the shadows at least. So let's see, let's drag this one up to around here. So keep that in mind. For the colors, you could go for ease or maybe linear, but right now I want for the shadows to be constant. So I also want to add a texture to the tree so that we have a nice wooden texture. And I chose this one that I'll put a link down below on the video. So if you want, you can use this one or you can use another one. Let's set it to box, and we could go with a total blend if you want. And right now it looks really good already, so we don't have to make any changes. And right now we have a texture applied, and you can play around with the colors and get a better shade if you are not happy with what you have. For the tree itself, we won't be getting any leaf texture. That would be way too much since we have so many trees, and you won't be paying attention to the action. You'll be looking instead at the textures. All right, that looks pretty good. So now we have a nice looking tree already. I'll just play around with this Fresnel effect a bit more. And when I'm satisfied, we could go and do the same for all the trees that we have in our collection. But first, I want a darker green to start with, since we have a dark map. So that's actually a pretty good look. We can also shade it smooth. And I think I'll do this for the whole map. And right now the lighting looks weird, but that's alright. We are in material preview. So as you can see, the shadows are much softer if you go for shade smooth. Okay, that's a good look for the shadows. And some nice light going through it and dispersing everything. We can always change that later. Alright, and now that we are done with the first tree, we want to apply the same materials to all of the trees that we created. But first, let me just create another material, and this one would be an interesting one. Let's call it outlines and keep the principal BSDF, but drag it to a dark, a total black. And I want to add a solidify modifier to the tree, and it has to be a really low value, but it should be on minus. So keep that in mind. And also, if you go here, you can select the normals and press flip and high quality. And also you want to drag this in front and go to settings and set it to alpha blend. And shadow mode should be none. Also, you have to check bakeface culling, and right now, as you can see, we have a really nice stroke around the tree. And if you want to make it bigger, you can just take the thickness up, but take care not to insert a really huge value. So that's a really nice effect that we can set for our materials, and it already looks really cartoonish and the shapes are well defined even though we have a smooth blending. So we'll be actually duplicating this effect on all of our assets. All right, now the tree is done. Let's save first, and then let me just quietly and fast apply the materials to all of the trees. So let me explain really fast. What I'm doing right here is I want to link the materials and the modifiers from the first tree to all of the others, and then I want to go separate into each tree and add that extra line where it's needed so that we separate the trunk from the tree top. And yep, that's it. Okay, so now that we are done with the trees, let's save and let's take a look at the map and see for ourselves what the result is. All right, so they look pretty nice already. Sure, there are some trees on top of other trees yet, so we still have too many of them and they overlap, but that's all right. We can solve that later. I just want to see how the shader looks like. So can play around with the shadows a bit more or maybe the Fresnel effect. But for now, let's get back to the other assets since we can do adjustments at a later phase. Okay, let's select the bushes, and right now we want to select the treetop texture that we did and duplicate it and call it bush. And it's actually gonna be pretty much the same texture that we created for the treetop, but we have to play around a bit with the shadow and the Fresnel effect so that the bush won't be in itself way too dark in our scene. It's really useful to create some procedural textures instead of those created with an image base, since you also have a smaller load on your editable and it's also much easier to reuse those into a big scene. So I'm a really big fan of those. Sure, it takes some time to set them up, but they are really useful. So I do recommend that. Okay, so let me just link the materials here. And We could add the modifiers for both of those, but I think I'll just copy the modifier from the tree, just like that. And then I want to go to these two and select them. All right, let me just add the outlines first, and for this one also. The outlines look pretty big right now, so what you want to do is actually to go to the solidify modifier that we added, and you want to drag the value down. So because some assets are really large, you need a thicker line, and some are smaller, so you need a thinner one. So let's go for these assets to 0,015. All right, that looks better already. Now we have our bushes set up. And let's save again. And we want right now to do the grass. So we need to select one strand, or you can select all of them together and do the same that we did for the bushes. So let me select this one and go for bush. And right now it looks pretty dark, doesn't it? So let me just select all of those and press on link materials. And then we select this one and copy modifiers. But that's way too much for our grass, so we need to modify that part. So let me select those again, and this one, and link the modifiers and the materials also. I actually don't know why I linked the modifier since it's way too large right now, but I'll just have to cope with that. So let's select this strand. Okay, and let's take the outlines also. Actually, I think I shouldn't have hurried with linking materials since we had to add the outlines also. And the modifier, we have to change that to, let's say, 0.005. Okay, that's a good value. And now we can actually link the materials and the modifiers. Oh, okay, yeah. Right now it looks much better. So let's do the same for this one with this strand and materials and modifiers also. The shortcut for that is Ctrl L, as you can see on the left side. So let's save again and take a look. All right. That's starting to look like something already. So let's go back to front view and let's go to our rocks and select the first one. And right now we could actually use the assets from before. So let's select again the tree top, or actually let's go for the tree trunk. And we can duplicate this one and let's call it rocks. All right, and as you can see, we have a texture for the wood here. So let me just change the values to some dark gray and some lighter gray. So let's go for around this amount and let's copy and paste it here. And let's take the white out, go around this amount. Okay, and we sure can drag it around, but first let's change this texture to another one. So I chose this one. You can come with your own texture, but I think this one fits really good in our scene. Let me shade it smooth, and then we can play around with the shadows and the vanilla effect. Okay, so let's change the scale for the texture first, since I want it to be much larger. So if you go for less than 1, it would be a bigger texture, and if you go for more than 1, it would make it smaller depending on the multiplier that you put. Okay, so I change it this amount of Fresnel. I really don't want a lot of light for my stones. So let's take the roughness up also. And that looks pretty good already. So let's apply also the outlines. And I want to add the solidify modifier. I know I can copy it, but I can add it manually also. So let's go for minus 0.01 meters. And let's go to normals, flip, high quality. And for materials, let's drag it here. And we can see already the outline. So if you feel that you need a thicker outline, go for that. I'll just keep it at this amount since it's already dark gray. So let's select all of them, link materials and copy modifiers. And we don't need to modify anything since those are gonna look pretty much the same. The only difference that is the shape that they have. So let's drag the light a bit more up and let's save since we have our rocks settled. Oops, seems like we have a rogue stone down there. We'll have to check that later. Okay, the particle system seems to be looking pretty nice for now. And we have all our trees ready. So we are still missing out on something. At first, let me just go to wireframe mode, and I saw something that we don't have the origin set properly. So let me just move those again. So I just want to make sure that we have the origin point set where it should be so that our trees or stones don't come out of the sky when we put them onto the map with the particle system. Because the particle system takes the origin point and that's where it emits the objects from. And that's why I put them all at the bottom. So it looks like we have everything in order. So let's go back to material preview again. And I want to also make another change to our props. So let's go to our environment and let's make the cloud selectable. And I want to create a material for those also. But actually first, we forgot a couple of assets. So we want to take on the wilted trees also. So we need to go to the cemetery. Or actually they weren't into the cemetery. They're separate. Okay. So here they are. And let me just make them selectable. So I want to actually use the same material that I use for the tree trunk. So let's take that one and I want to duplicate it. Okay, and let's call this one wilted tree. And we can actually leave everything as it is and just change the colors to a darker tone. Since the texture that we chose is actually looking like a wilted tree already, so that's perfect for us. We can also change a bit the shadows if you want, so you can add more shadows since it's a dead tree, so it wouldn't reflect that much light anymore. Let's go for this look. And also take the roughness up. And that's a really fast way. So let's add the outlines. And let's add the solidify modifier that we make for all of those. So minus 0.01. Normals, flip, high quality, and materials in front. Okay, that looks like a good amount already for the line. And we can just select the other two and copy the modifier and link the materials. And yay! We already have our wilted trees done. So let's save and go back to the clouds that we wanted to work on earlier. So for the clouds, I think I'll do something a bit different. So let me go to materials and create one from the base material. So I'll call this cloud. And let's take the material output here and let's add first a shader, transparent shader. And I want to add a mix shader also. So I want to mix the transparent with the BSDF. And you can control here the amount. And also I want to take transmission and I want to take it up to 0.3 or 0.4. You can go even higher if you want. So basically what I want is to make the cloud see-through, but not totally. So I want to take the specular down to 0 and the roughness to around 0.6. And if you want, you can change the color for the cloud for the transparent shader. So I'll change it to a really light blue. Or you can leave it to white, that's your choice. And I also want to add the outlines. Let's see if that looks good on them. So we need to add also the solidify and leave it with a little bit of thickness. So let's see how that looks. All right, so you can see the silhouette a bit more, but I don't know if that's actually fitting for the clouds. We could go for even thicker line, so that does look cartoonish, but it looks just a bit out of place. Well, if we don't like it, we can just take the outlines out from there and that would be fine. So right now we have no real light set up in here, and let's take the light around here and see how that looks with some light reflected. Let's make the power 10,000 and okay, that's how it looks. So let's take this up. Looks like the house still has the same material applied, so that's really funny. We have a cloudy house, it seems. Let's go for something around this amount. And it's alright, right now we have just a white color, we'll be changing that later. So if you want, you can add a subdivision surface modifier to it and it will look smoother. But I won't do that, I want to keep it as low polygon as possible. So let's select all the clouds and link the materials and copy the modifiers and shade smooth. And right now we have our clouds set up also. So yeah, that is it for today. All right, so it already feels much better not to have a black and white map. So that's what we managed to do for today, but no worry, on to the next tutorial we'll be continuing shading all of our assets. So if you enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you there. Bye.